This is not one of those videos about how many birdies and bogeys you need to break 80. I feel like you probably already know that. In this video, we're going to talk about the next level strategy and techniques that will get you playing your best way more often. Because what got you here isn't what's going to get you there. Now, a lot of people pick this stuff up through osmosis from better players, maybe takes a few years, or through expensive coaching, which takes a few years and a few bucks. But you don't have to do any of that because in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what that looks like. So let's get right into it. Hey, what's up? I'm Manu, and welcome to the whiteboard of wonderful wisdom, which is my 672nd most prized possession. I call him Waldo. So in this video, we're going to talk about five sections right here. And the fifth one is called Accelerators, which is shortcuts I've found to getting the results that we want. So stick around for that because the other four will explain a lot of stuff, and Accelerators accelerate it. Get it? Now, I just talked about next level strategy. So let's start with that. Section one is strategy. Before we get into deep, one quick note. There's a lot of information in this video, and in my humble opinion, I think it's quite good. So you might feel like, oh my God, there's all this stuff coming at me. It's a little overwhelming. What do I focus on? So my suggestion is just listen to it all to start with. Let your brain get like a spatial landscape, I guess, view of all the stuff. And also trust your subconscious mind to like store this and pull it out at the right time. But at the end of this, once you understand all the key points, you can then decide what the highest value point is for you to start working on. And then every so often you can pop back in on this video, maybe next week, maybe every few days, to see what you want to work on next or get a refresher. Cool? Cool. So on to strategy. Now, as you get better, the thinking part of golf becomes more and more important because hitting a good shot to a bad target is not a good outcome. And so when you're a 90s golfer or even like a high 80s golfer, often the goal is like hit ball well, and maybe I'll hit the longest club I could possibly hit, and then hopefully it'll all work out. But as you get better, now you've got options. So you're thinking about different shots you can hit. And the simplest form of strategy is which shot to hit next. So let's talk about that. I have a system I call the complete targeting system, TM. I don't know, TM maybe. I call it the complete targeting system, and that's an acronym for, number one, conditions. So when you're planning what shot to hit, the first thing you have to take into account is the conditions. And the way I think about this is all the stuff that is beyond my control that's still going to affect my shot. So this is stuff like the lie, or the wind, or the hazards that are in, that was a really weird way to write lie. Anyway, or the hazards that are in the way of the shot that you're going to hit. And the reason this is important is because no matter what, they're still going to affect your shot. And a really good example of this is if you watch the pros, right? They talk incessantly with their caddies about all of these conditions before they hit the shot. Like how many times you hear the announcers talk about the lie? The lie is really important because the ball's going to act differently if it's coming out of the fairway than the rough, right? So taking these into account before you even get to like shot selection or club selection is very, very important. And just a quick note here, I've talked to a bunch of people who are like, oh, this is too complicated for me. Yes, it is complicated, but you can't escape it. It's like gravity. Gravity might be complicated, but you can't jump off a mountain and be like, oh, you know, I'll be fine. It's too complicated for me. I can't think about that. No, that's dumb. So it's dumb to not consider conditions. And once you consider conditions, then you can move on to step two, which is the T in CTS, which is about the target. Now, target selection is super important because you need to tell your mind where you want the ball to go. If you think about everything in your life that you have achieved, before it happened in real life, first it happened in your mind. And so deciding on a precise target for where you want the shot to go is a super, super important part of shot strategy. Now, for most like hundreds, 90s, 80s golfers, a lot of people I play with, they're generally going in a general direction. And that's great, that's fine, because for them the goal is, hey, put a good swing on this. I gotta go through my 17 swing keys and make sure I hit this ball in that direction. But the thing is that doesn't really yield good results because they're only really thinking about hitting the ball, and it doesn't tell their mind exactly what they're trying to do. Their mind gets stuck here instead of being out there. And so when I think about target selection, as you get better, one of the things you want to look for, the two things you want to look for are, one, where's the ball going to land? And the second part is, where's the ball going to roll? And as I talked earlier, you know, the stuff is going to affect this. So for example, depending on the lie, the amount of roll you're going to get is going to vary. The second part of target selection that I think is very important is understanding your risk and reward trade-off, because you know where you're picking your target is effectively what decides kind of how aggressive you're going to be on this shot. And maybe you're like Tiger, where you're going aggressively to conservative targets, or maybe you're like Phil, where you're going aggressively to aggressive targets. Now, you should pick the right thing for you, but as you're getting down from the 80s to the 70s, I would suggest you pick more conservative targets because the biggest thing that's going to cause you problems is just making a bunch of bogeys. And we want to try to avoid those as much as possible. So the risk reward trade-off is really important. The reason I mention it, don't just say, hey, always pick the conservative route, is because sometimes you don't want to pick the conservative route. You know, if you're playing a skins game, or if you really need to catch up, or you're playing your local muni, for example, and there's not that much of a penalty for being short-sighted, go for the risk. If it's the opposite, right? Like yesterday when I was trying to hit the ball over the water and I ended up hitting a fade into the lake, that's not a smart place to take a risk. Maybe don't do that. Now, you might think I'm talking about boring golf, you know, choosing the conservative targets. I like to think of it less as boring golf and more as maximum strokes gained golf. And I'm not saying they're the same thing. You want to go down the maximum strokes gained route, where is the smartest spot for me to put this ball such that I can get the lowest score on the hole. Now, there's an app I use that I really like if you want to learn more about strokes gained. It's called Shot Pattern. I'll put a link and a discount code in the description, and you can check it out. I think it's a wonderful app. I use it all the time. It's also really helpful for shot dispersion, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. So really useful. I think net what it comes down to is if you pick a good target, you are much more likely to execute to that target. And the way you execute is with the S in the CTS, which stands for swing. So once you've figured out what the conditions are like, and therefore what target you want to aim for, now you can think about how does the ball need to travel in order for it to get there, and then you can choose the right club and the trajectory you want to hit, et cetera, et cetera. So pretty simple. I'm going to write that down: club and I guess shot shape if needed, right? So high, low, fade, draw, et cetera, et cetera. Having said all that, I'm going to throw in a couple of quick caveats. Ideally, try to be as simple as possible. And I think there's a bunch of people I work with or play with who are like, oh, I'm going to hit a little fade. Why are you hitting a little fade? Just hit it straight. Hit it at the target. Don't add complexity where you don't need to. Also, don't hit clubs that you don't know how to hit or that you aren't good at. For a lot of people, this is the 3-wood. And if that's your Achilles heel also, maybe find other clubs to hit versus a 3-wood. I know a lot of people who like don't have the swing or the ability to hit that 3-wood well, yet they keep pulling it out when they want to hit a long shot. And then shortly after, they're hitting a 5-wood from 20 yards in front of where they started. So don't be that person. And the final point on the swing piece is really to account for your natural miss. Now, this is very much a conversation I'm having with myself right now because I keep trying to hit draws with my driver and my driver inevitably fades, and ball in lake, it's not fun. So account for your natural miss. Understand what it's like, especially on days when I'm a little bit tight or I haven't had a lot of time to warm up. The odds of me hitting a fade with my driver are 114%. And so there is no reason I should ever be trying to hit a draw or trying to hit the ball like perfectly straight. So take that into account when you're thinking about both your target, obviously, but also what kind of shot shape you're going to be hitting to try to get to that point. So there you have CTNS, the CTS system, complete targeting system. Yeah, I couldn't find another word for target, so I chose target. But anyway, I really like this. This works for me basically every time. It's really easy. What conditions can I not avoid? What's my target? And therefore, what kind of swing do I want to put on the ball? The next part of this, which I think is really, really important in terms of like core strategy, is the feedback loop. And so one thing I've learned from a lot of people as I play with them is I ask them, oh, what went wrong on that shot? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know is a very honest answer. It's not helpful. And so I suggest when something goes wrong, right, you figure out what went wrong so you can make decisions and fix it. The other part of this, which I think is really, really, really important, is you also have to understand what went right. So when things go right, very important to think about, okay, what are the things I did that got me to this place of it being right? And quick segue here, or quick little side diversion here. I think I learned more from good rounds than from bad ones. And that's because in good rounds, I understand what I need to do to play well. And so I have a target, I have a location I can go to. With bad rounds, it didn't go well. I'm more in like, this is what I don't want to do. But the don't want to do group is like this big, and the what I want to do is like fairly narrow. And so it's easy for me, if I know what I need to do to play well, I can pull that out when I need to do it, right? And so speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about what qualifies as a bad shot or a shot you can improve on. If you watch one of my other videos, I talk about I don't believe in bad shots per se, but for the sake of this conversation, let's just call them bad shots. So when I think about a bad shot, I think about it basically in like, there's 3 kinds of bad shots or 3 things that can happen. One, it's outside your standard dispersion. And so step 1, figure out what your standard dispersion is, be nice to yourself. And when I say dispersion, I mean like you're not hitting lasers, you're hitting kind of like, a shotgun, like a wide blast. So any shot you're gonna miss by some amount. Pick a number, 10%, 15%, whatever. Pick that, make that your dispersion. I would pick a number that gets you to like roughly 80% of your shots. Don't be too like, pedantic about this, just stick to like 80%. So once you get that outside of that dispersion, that qualifies as a bad shot because you missed your 80% shot. The second kind of bad shot is it might be within your dispersion, but it ends up in a place that doesn't allow you to make a good score from that spot. So being short-sighted, for example, that's a bad shot. That might not be a bad swing, but it might be not a good assessment of the conditions and the target. So a couple things to think about there. The third kind of bad shot is one that works out, but you know you did something that wasn't right. And so that's okay. A key point in this is, as you're thinking about these bad shots, is be kind to yourself, right? Don't go crazy on like, I hit 85 shots today and 60 of them were terrible. It's not true. You're probably only going to improve if you focus on like 15 of them, right? So getting too many more than that, it's not going to be worthwhile. So stick to the 80-20 rule, but having that feedback loop will really help you get better over time because the I don't know doesn't create any growth. Understanding what happened and therefore what you can do to fix it, right? Especially you could use these. Think about these. Did I do the correct things across these three to get me to that point? Which one of these did I miss? It's an easy way to move into like how to hit better shots. Now, if you really want to get better and fast, the secret is you can actually pre-plan a lot of this stuff beforehand, and that will help you get better way, way, way faster. Let me tell you a little bit about this. So if you take some time beforehand, even for your home course, change your life. Trust me, I know my home course inside out. The first time I did a course plan, actually changed my strategy significantly, so totally worth it. If you do some course planning beforehand, the value is that your brain does not look at the course when you get there as like a strange, new, crazy thing where it has to think about all these things. So it has an idea that, oh, the stuff that I'm seeing is like somewhat familiar, and so it calms down a little bit. Also, other key points, basically with course planning, kind of having a general game plan of like each hole is going to calm your brain down. And the second part that I really think is important is knowing what you're going to hit off of every tee. So tee strategy, we'll call it. So having this takes that thinking off your plate, which is great because the more you can reduce your mental load, the more space there is for you to play well when you get on the course. Because otherwise, we don't really recognize this, but the fatigue from the mental fatigue of like strategy after strategy, especially like when you're struggling on a day when like you're not playing well, there's a lot of thinking going on because you're planning for all this extra stuff. You're probably hitting more shots. So instead of, 75 shots, you're hitting 85 shots. So that automatically has gone up by another like 15%. So there's a lot of other stuff that happens that really loads your brain down. The more you can kind of pre-plan this stuff, it leaves more space in your mind to be more relaxed, and the fatigue doesn't kick in on, say, like hole number 14, and then you finish double, double, bogey, double, right? Which I've never, ever done a lot. Anyway, I played a tournament a while ago. I finished bogey, double, triple. Yeah, it's a real thing. So this is really important. I think this is absolutely next level. I course plan for every tournament. This is my course plan from one of my most recent ones. Like I've got a plan for each hole, like what shot I'm gonna hit, where there's space, where I don't wanna be. I've got some additional notes here on like slope. So for example, how much elevation I need to add to it. And then, yeah, this is also my cheat sheet, which we'll talk about shortly. I think this is really, really important. It takes a lot of the weight off your mind. It doesn't take that long to do. I literally just used, this is a letter piece of paper. I fold it in half, and the front 9 is on one side and the back 9 is on the other. I look through like whatever app I'm using and I get an idea of what I need to do that day. Now, is this actually gonna happen? Ideally, yes, and then I'll win the tournament. But sometimes it doesn't, which is basically all the time, and you can adapt. But knowing this, it's that famous line, right? Like where plans are nothing, but planning is everything. Absolutely 100% important in golf. So from a strategy perspective, using the CTS model will absolutely completely change your life, which is great, but really implementing that feedback loop and doing some course planning, next level, right? So very, very important. And with that, let's move on to number 2. And here we are at number 2, which is all about technique. Before we get into that, I have some newsletter. Haha, terrible joke. I'm sorry, but I am starting a newsletter. It's not a joke newsletter. It's actually a golf newsletter. There will probably be some jokes in there. I hope they'll get better. We'll find out. But the only way you will find out is if you sign up for it. So please use the link below and sign up, and it'll be fun. We'll talk about golf stuff. I'll be sharing a lot of the other thoughts and ideas and tips I have that often don't make it into videos because videos take a long time to produce, and I have hundreds of other things that I share. So they'll be in the newsletter. Please sign up, and hopefully it'll all be helpful for you. Accelerate your way to breaking 80, maybe even 70, 60, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. So anyway, yeah, sign up. All right, with that, let's get back onto technique. And no, this is not a bunch of swing tips. Everyone's different. You're probably at a different place in your journey and everyone needs different help. And there's a lot of content out there for this. However, there are some things that will definitely accelerate your growth and your ability to get better faster. And so I wanted to share a few of those because I think they're core and basically everybody can use them. And the first one of these is stability. Now, I've talked about this in some of my other content, and I think it is super, super, super important. There's not enough supers here. Basically, one thing you'll notice, and try this out, watch what the golfers you see on TV versus the people you see at the driving range. What you'll notice is the people on TV are a lot more stable and strong in their swings versus the people on the driving range are kind of all over the place. They're like, really wobbly. And that is a really good indicator of how well they're gonna hit the ball generally. Because if all the really good golfers are really stable and the not good ones are not stable, correlation causation kind of figures that self out, right? And so one way that as you improve from becoming an 80s golfer to a 70s golfer, one thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a lot stronger and a lot more stable over the ball. And this applies across the board. This applies to your driver swing all the way down to your putting. One simple way to improve your putting is just to stop with the wobbliness as you're putting, because that affects your putter face the whole time. Let me take a moment to tell you why stability is so important. It's because the brain's #1 goal is to prevent us from being embarrassed on the golf course. And the most embarrassing thing that can happen on the golf course is that you fall over while you're swinging. So if you're trying to deliver the club a certain way, but your kind of weight's all over the place, the weight being all over the place is going to be the first thing that the brain optimizes for, because you're wobbly, and so the club's not going to be delivered in the way you want it delivered. So as you're thinking about swing changes, things you're improving your game and you're trying to make everything work better, the core thing, like the #1 prerequisite that's required, is your ability to stay standing. And so if you can just focus on that as you go through, even when you're chipping, if you can just notice how strong and able to stand firmly are you. You can you have your weight shift, of course. I'm not trying to say don't do that. But it is important that you're not falling over. There's not a lot of movement as you're doing this. And so this will accelerate your ability to make the swing changes that you want to make and actually get a lot more distance, because your body will be able to deliver the club at higher speeds and with more power, basically. And the second thing that is really, really important that I think a lot of people don't do, and they really should, is focusing on alignment. Now, in one of my previous videos, somebody left a comment, which I thought was a wonderful comment, where they said they once played with a caddy who used to be on the PGA Tour, and the caddy said that pros work on 3 things: alignment, alignment, alignment. And I'm not sure how true that is, but it's kind of evident. If you look at the pros, all seem to have, an alignment stick on the ground when they're hitting shots. If you watch them on TV, they care a lot when they set up about making sure that they're aligned properly to the target. I think that's a huge deal. And for a lot of us, the way that we tend to set up, there are so many inconsistencies in our pre-shot routine and what we're thinking about, and the fact that we don't tend to care about alignment as much, that all create these problems. I will share one tip I've learned about alignment though, which I thought was fantastic, and it has massively improved my ability to be well aligned when I'm hitting shots. I learned it from Eric Cogorno in an interview he did with another great PGA teacher. His name is Lou Guzzi, and I'll link it down below. You should watch this. It's a really good video. Basically what he talks about is you have a field of view, right? So this is the screen that you're looking at when you're set up, trying to hit the shot. And when you're aligned correctly, so you can figure this out in practice, when you're aligned correctly at the target is in a specific spot. And Lou Guzzi calls it the scope, that's where it is. And so for me, that spot is, if I'm looking at you here, for me, that spot is here. And so if I know that if I'm standing here and I'm looking at the target, it's here, I'm probably aligned correctly. If that target is here, then I'm aligned too far to the left. And if that target is here, I'm aligned too far to the right. It's really that simple. So that's an easy check. When I look up, if I'm looking at the target and the target looks over here, I'm like, yikes, I'm aiming too far to the right. Either I'm going to be thinking about hitting a draw, or I need to fix and step back and change my alignment again. And speaking of targeting, I think another core point in technique or setting up in the technique world is commitment. And so this could also be considered part of what we talked earlier about setting up to the ball, but I think it fits as part of the technique. And really it's about committing to a target. Now, often what happens is when you're setting up, you don't commit to a target. You're like, oh, should I aim left? Should I aim right? Am I trying to draw and try? What am I trying to do? Which way is the wind moving? All this other stuff. And so we end up being a little nervous that we're not aiming at the right spot. And so our commitment levels are not at 100%. Now, the issue with that is, imagine stepping up to a shot and you're not 100% committed on where you're trying to hit it. You're probably going to do all of the cardinal sins going to have. You're probably going to decelerate. You're probably going to be a little bit too loose while you're hitting the ball. You're probably not going to follow through in the same way because you're second guessing where you're hitting. Don't do that. That's going to hurt your ability to hit good shots. I would much rather have a committed swing to the wrong target than have an uncommitted swing to nowhere. because that uncommitted swing is going to lead to, you know, the big wipes, the big misses, etc. At least to the wrong target, if I have a committed swing, I'm going to have a decent trajectory, and it's not going to be that far off. It might be a little bit off, but probably not going to be that far off. So commitment to the target, I'll say to target here because it's so important. Commitment to the target is very, very important. And my suggestion is, as you're setting up to the ball to make this happen, if you are not committed, you should step back, decide, commit, and then step up before you set up. The right place to choose a target is not while you're standing. You know, I've already gone through my think box, I've gone through my feel box, I'm on the play box, I'm standing here and I'm like, all right, where's my target? No, that's not how this works. The think box, which is at the beginning, that's where the targeting piece happens, right? We talked about that, conditions, target, swing, all of that stuff happens in the think box. Question for you, like, this is an easy thing to measure. You could literally put on your scorecard for each shot on every hole you play the next time you play, how committed were you to the target? And really there's only a 0 or 1 answer. You're either fully committed or you're not fully committed. And this will make a massive difference to your game. And speaking of the think, feel, play boxes, let's talk about one of them, which is the practice swing. And so that's in the feel box. It's very, very important. I think a lot of people, actually I've played with a lot of people who don't take a practice swing. They feel like it might slow them down. They don't want to slow the game down. Sometimes they're like, yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I think a practice swing is incredibly important because, like I said with the target in the last section, it's important to tell your brain what you want. And so you can tell it, hey, this is where I want to go. You can also tell it, hey, here's how that shot should feel as I hit it. And like going back to the pros, because it's always just really easy. You look at people who do it really well and you see what they do, and then you try to copy them in the places that's reasonable to copy them. Practice swing is a really good one. So 2 things about the practice swing. A, the majority of people I have not found anybody who doesn't do one, but I'm going to leave the options open just in case there is somebody. In general, the majority of people on the PGA, LPGA tours, they all take practice swings. So think, feel, play box. I've got a video up here. I'll link it. The think, feel, play box, they think through, this is my target. Feel box, this is where the practice swing happens. This is what the thing's going to feel like. The second is make a practice swing that focuses on the feels of how the club will move, not just the speed, right? And so I think a lot of us, especially when we're not as good, we tend to take full speed practice swings or near full speed practice swings. But when you're doing that, you're so focused on the speed and feeling the whoosh or whatever, like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do and hit the ball hard, that you don't get the actual point of, okay, if I'm gonna hit this ball this far, it needs to go from here to here. And when you're swinging the club hard or fast, your body's just focusing on staying standing versus contacting the ball. So when you're taking a practice swing, make it slow and deliberate, just like all the pros do. And these are some simple things that we can copy. There's some stuff you can't copy, but this stuff you can. And next up, since we've already talked about the think, feel, play box a number of times, let's talk about the whole thing, which is the pre-shot routine. And I'm just gonna call this PSR here because it's so important that we should all just know the acronym. I guess so. The pre-shot routine, you know, this video is all about breaking 80 consistently. If you want to be consistent, I'd say, I don't think it's the number one most important thing. The number one most important thing is your pre-round routine, which we'll also talk about. But the pre-shot routine, I think, is probably in the top 3 most important things to get consistency, because you're a different person on every shot. You're more tired, less tired, you've been talking to people, you've reacted to other shots, the weather's different, you're more or less dehydrated, whatever it might be. And so you're a different person every time you step up to the ball. The way that you can get back into a good mental frame to hit this ball is to have a pre-shot routine. Now, you've probably heard about pre-shot routines. I'll give you maybe a breaking 80 kind of version of the pre-shot routine. Step 1, you don't need to be like super pedantic about it. Just, it's okay, right? You watch a lot of stuff where people talk about, oh, you know, Tiger's pre-shot routine is always 15.6 seconds. Yeah, he's Tiger Woods. Like, he's hit 1 billion balls in his life. Right? We hit balls like maybe, you know, I hit balls like maybe once every other week when I get a chance to go for an hour. There's no chance I'm able to like tune my practice or my pre-shot routine to be like 15.6 seconds every time. It does not matter if it's exactly the same length every time for you generally, right? Obviously the more consistent you can get, probably work out better. But if you're stressing about like, oh, I'm taking too long, like that takes away from the whole concept of the pre-shot routine. So be kind to yourself. And I would think more of like the steps you want to go through to create this pre-shot routine versus making it exactly the same amount of time every single time. So I think there's like 3 or 4 steps to include in the pre-shot routine. There's how you step up to the ball. There's the 3 or 4 things you do to get ready. So an easy one here, you can copy mine if you'd like. It's not complicated. Look at the target, look at an intermediate target, step up, set up next to the ball, put the club down to the intermediate target, set my feet up, square the club to the correct ball position of wherever I'm trying to hit, look up, look at the target, get a feel for, you know, this is where I'm going, this is the distance, wiggle, get stable, right? Wiggle, get stable. And I can do this 2 or 3 times if I want to. I can do it once if I want to, if I'm feeling good. But the core thing I'm trying to do here is not take too long, and I don't want to be inserting new thoughts into the process. One of the things, I will throw this out, if you add too much space in the pre-shot routine, like, you know, nature abhors a vacuum, it's gonna happen, right? So you're gonna end up having a bunch of extra thoughts that you don't wanna be paying attention to, because your brain has one natural language processor, and if you're thinking about those thoughts, you're not letting your procedural memory basically like hit the shot. So the fewer things you can have, the better off you'll generally be. For me, it's like connecting to the target and telling myself the yardage. Do what works for you. And having said all that, come back to the main point, which is a pre-shot routine is super, 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 super important. If you can just get this down, I promise, like, you'll be like, dun, 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 dun. You'll notice that drop in your scores at some point soon. Speaking of which, let's talk about that for a second. The other key point about pre-shot routines is you need to be patient with your pre-shot routine. It's gonna take time. The first time I went through this in a really painful way, I would try a new pre-shot routine. I'm like, oh man, it didn't work. And then I would try another one. I would try another one, another one. But I was only trying them like 1 round at a time or a few holes at a time. And I would get frustrated because it wasn't working. Now, in the previous video, I talked about this, about System 2 versus System 1 memory. And if you haven't read this book called Thinking Fast and Slow, it is a tome, but it is a fantastic book. It's probably one of the best books, non-golf books I've read that relates completely to golf. So highly recommend it if you have a chance. It's a Nobel Prize winning book, so another reason. System 2 versus System 1 is really about, like, when you first learn something, it's something you have to spend actual mental effort on. And guess what? There's only this much space in your brain. So if you're spending all that effort on just remembering the steps to go through for your pre-shot routine, you're not really going to enable your body to make that perfect swing or the program swing, your athleticism, etc. So give yourself some time. Once you do this for a little while, I'd say at least like 2 rounds, 2 to 3 rounds within your routine, then you can start tweaking it. But I would not start tweaking it around number 1. It won't work. And then you'll just be frustrated, and then you'll yell at me, and, you know, nobody will be happy. So all the warnings right now apply, right? And I think the same thing applies to basically anything else you're doing that's cognitive. New swing thoughts, you know, new mental ways of like approaching the game. Like, give yourself some space, give yourself some time. You need to not be spending a bunch of like active thinking on that thing before it starts really giving you benefits. So you have been warned, but this is one thing that will change your life. So if you can be a little bit patient with making this work, seriously, it's like a massive, massive shift to your game. Okay, and the next key part of technique is what I call gap analysis, which is understanding which shots you're gonna need on a regular basis, operative words, regular basis, that you're not good at hitting or you can't hit. Now, these might be bunker shots, right? Let's suppose you're not good at bunker shots, that's a gap. Or these might be like chip shots, they might be downhill bunker shots. Any shot that's like relatively common that you need to hit, and this is really important to notice, is there are a whole bunch of shots, because we have limited time, there are a whole bunch of shots that we're not gonna be able to work on. And I'll give you an example. The other day I was playing with a friend of mine, and he ended up under a tree, and he had to hit a pitching wedge out about 110 yards, but he had to like punch it under the tree to get it there. And he punched it, but he couldn't gauge the distance right, and so he ended up being like 30 yards short. And he was like, you know, after this round, I'm gonna go hit 100 of these shots. And I was like, really? Why? Like, when was the last time you had to hit a punch pitching wedge out from under a tree and have it roll like 40 yards or 50 yards up onto the green? Like, if that's not something that's gonna happen, you know, once in 2 rounds, you should not be working on it, because we have limited time to practice. And so I think, especially like when it comes to gap analysis, notice what the big gaps are, right? If you can't hit out of fairway bunkers, you should learn how to hit out of fairway bunkers. If you can't hit, you know, downhill bunker shots, you should learn how to hit downhill bunker shots. But trying to learn how to hit like an uphill bunker shot above your feet in the side and trying to get it close, like, Or here's a personal example. I used to spend all my time, I used to spend so much time in every session practicing these like big flop shots, because I'd watch the Phil Mickelson video on like the secrets of the short game, and I was like, flop shot, flop shot. I barely ever need a flop shot in a round, because A, I've got good strategy, so I'm aiming in a place where I'm not going to be short-sighted where I need to hit a flop shot. And B, generally trying to land a flop shot to the point of being able to get up and down, like at that point, just take your bogey, move on, right? It's not worth your time. So now I don't work on flop shots. I hit chips, I hit like simple chips, and generally I find a way around it, and I plan my game according to that. If I do need to hit a flop shot, I enjoy the opportunity to hit a flop shot, and I just assume it's okay. I'm gonna make bogey. That's life, it's okay. If I can somehow make the putt, great. But otherwise, we'll just move on and get birdie somewhere else. Because I've worked on the other things, the 80% of shots much more frequently, right? To get that experience. And speaking of 80%, let's talk about this practice piece, which I think is really important, which is when you're practicing, I think it's really important, A, as we talked about with the gap analysis, focus on the 80% shots. But then B, on this point, is really to think about swing maintenance versus swing changes. Now, as golfers, like, we're always working on trying to make the swing better, and I'm sure you learn some stuff off YouTube. Thank you. And you try to go apply it and try to get better. And so there's always something we're working on. The problem is that doesn't leave us in like a good stable place when we're going to the course in terms of like what we're going to execute on. And so if you've always got new swing thoughts going through your head, that's going to make it hard for you to be able to execute in the way you need to play better. So my suggestion is you can work on swing changes on the range, right? Don't take them to the course until they are pretty good to go. And speaking of coming back to the maintenance piece, I think is important is as much time as you get on the range, definitely spend ideally at least half of it on swing maintenance. That's like hitting the important shots that you already know how to hit to like undo the rust that accumulates as we, sit at our desks or do the other stuff that we do that's not golf, which, yeah, I know it's terrible, but we all have to do it. So swing maintenance is a big deal. And as you get more comfortable and stable in your swing and you don't spend all your time on swing changes, you'll notice your scores also start to drop because at least now you'll have a repeatable, easy thing you can do that gets you playing better every single time. And if you do decide to go play around with your new swing changes, the first round, 2, 3, however many rounds, just like let go of the scores for a little bit because your mind is going to be busy. Even though you've transported it from the range to the course, you've done it a lot of times on the range, your mind is still going to be busy. I talked earlier about system 2 versus system 1. It's really that important. So just be kind to yourself and like focus more on the swing changes in the process and less on the score until it becomes more system 1. And now you're actually going to be able to start seeing the results of what you're working on. And next, a very tactical suggestion, which is specifically about the short game. So I suggest you learn 2 wedges, 2 different chipping type shots, and 2 bunker shots. And let me explain what this is about. So with 2 wedges, I like using my 60 degree and my 56 degree. And it's because the 60 degree I can hit a little bit higher and it rolls less. And the 56 degree I can hit to roll a little bit more. I know people who use 8 irons off the green, 9 irons off the green. I don't have that much time to practice, so it's hard for me to gauge run out of the 8 iron and 9 iron. And every time I've tried it, it's usually rolled off the green. So I'm more comfortable with just hitting those 2 wedges. I think it's important to get comfortable with more than 1 wedge because sometimes you're gonna need to hit the ball high, sometimes you're gonna need to hit it low. And even if you put the ball in the back of your stance with like a lob wedge, it's just not as good at like rolling the ball out. And if you're smart and you're not short-sighted, as we talked about with the targeting and the stuff earlier, then you're gonna have more space and you're gonna need to roll the ball. Then in terms of like 2 chips, I think it's important to learn 2 different chips. And those 2 chips really simply are a low one and a high one. The low one runs, the high one doesn't. And so I can hit, that's 4 chips, right? So I can hit a low and a high shot with my 60 degree and a low and a high shot with my 56 degree. And they roll out different amounts. They land and spin different amounts. That's what it is. I notice I did not say I can hit like really spinny shots with my 60 degree wedge. I can sometimes, but it's not something I'm depending on. And especially like as you're trying to break 80, I would highly recommend not depending on temperamental shots that you're not always going to pull off because it's just not smart. So you'll be better off knowing that the ball's going to land and then roll out a little bit. You'll just get better results. And then there's bunker shots too. I've got this terrible handwriting, but this says 2 bunker. I think everyone should learn 2 bunker shots, and it's very simple, nothing too complicated. Generally, if you're in a bunker, the odds of you getting up and down are pretty low, right? Pros make it look really easy. Pros are also pros. They get paid for this. That's all they do. We don't. So generally, when you're in a bunker, first of all, when you're in a bunker, there are 3 kinds of lies. 1, good lie where you can get, to the hole, whatever, you can go at it. 2, not a good lie, you can't get to the hole. And the 3rd is you're so stuck, you just have to like hack it out somehow. So maybe a fried egg or you're stuck in a lip or something. It's just not a good spot. So automatically, every bunker shot is not going to yield at least even an opportunity to get to where you want to go. So I think there's 2 shots you should learn. 1 is a normal / slightly uphill bunker shot. And the second is a downhill bunker shot, because those are going to be the 2 most common ones. Downhill lie is really important because it happens relatively frequently. And if you don't understand the technique, you're going to end up hitting that ball to the middle of the bunker where you're going to be able to use your first technique. But, that's a shot lost. And if you're going from, an 80 to a 79, that's a really important shot you don't want to lose. And speaking of common ones, the other important bunker shot from a length perspective is if you listen to like Phil Mickelson's philosophy on this, which he got from Dave Pelz, is that the average PGA Tour bunker shot was 10 yards. I've not done the research, but I'm assuming most courses we play on are probably pretty similar. And so Phil used to practice almost exclusively from 10 yards. That rough distance is fine. I think you should know how to hit a slightly longer shot, but I don't think you should spend a lot of time on it. Again, because we have limited time and we're looking at maintenance. And that leads us, after we've talked about this, to the final point, which is about the putter. This is something, I really had to get over my own ego for this because I was like, no, but I can hit a chip shot, I can do this and that, whatever. Once you start really focusing on score, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next couple of sections, you'll start realizing that the closer you can get the ball to the hole, the better off you're generally going to be. And it doesn't matter if you do it with a flop shot or you do it with a putter. If you really care that you do it with a flop shot over a putter, you should probably not play for score. You should play for glory, which is totally fine. And I do it every so often. It's totally good. It's good for the soul. Absolutely recommend it. However, if I'm playing a tournament and I need to get that ball up and down and it's 4 yards off the green and I can putt it, I will putt it every single time. So pull that putter out, get really good at obviously gauging distance and understanding what the ball's going to roll like off the green for sure in that the fringe area. But I think this will make a massive difference. So in terms of practicing technique, definitely hit some putts from off the green because it'll make a huge difference to your scores. Okay, here we are at number 3, which is about expectations. You've probably heard this a lot from a lot of different places. Expectations are really important. In fact, in my opinion, expectations are the number one thing that are going to stop you from getting better. And having optimal expectations will completely change your golf game and probably also your life. So no pressure on me to tell you some useful stuff here. So the reason that expectations have such a big impact on our games is because they affect our biochemistry. And biochemistry is basically the biggest determinant of how well you're going to hit the next shot. Your expectations and your response to those expectations changes your biochemistry, and that then determines your ability to hit your next shot. Let me give you an example. So let's suppose you hit a shot, you hit your drive, it goes right, you end up in the woods. You're angry because you're like, oh, this happens every time. I'm so pissed because I shouldn't do that. I should be hitting it straight, etc. You get up to the ball, you're angry. The moment you started with that anger in your mind, your body released adrenaline into your bloodstream. Basically, it says, yikes, time to panic. And it basically tells your body, hey, I need to either fight or run away, which moves all of the resources to your big muscles to be able to fight or run away. It takes away your fine motor control, which now as you're trying to hit a shot through the trees, nice and low, do this and that, whatever, and you need that fine motor control, the adrenaline's basically compromised that. So your biochemistry, which changed as a result of your expectations, is now basically removing your ability to hit that fine motor control shot to get out of trouble. The other thing to note is that once that adrenaline's released into your bloodstream, it doesn't just go away. It has what's called a half-life. It takes time to dissipate or metabolize. During that time, you're going to be compromised. And so, how you have blow-up holes and they last 5 to 10 minutes? Guess how long it takes adrenaline to leave your bloodstream? About 5 to 10 minutes until you have another bad shot and then there's another dump of adrenaline and so on. Now, that depends heavily on the story that you're telling yourself, right? So if it's construed as danger, you're going to have more of the unhappy chemicals that are going to make you hit worse shots versus if it's not construed as danger, if it's normal, it's like, oh, I know my dispersion is XYZ, or I've been in the woods before, it's not a big deal, or yeah, sure, it's not a big deal. I'll be fine. I'll just chuck it out and then I'll make par on this par 5. It's not a big deal. You're going to have a different outcome because that adrenaline can also lead to releasing cortisol. There's a lot more to it. If you'd like to know, if it's interesting to you, let me know and I'll make a video about it. Just put a comment down below and we'll talk about it another one. Net, what you need to know is that biochemistry is affected heavily by expectations, and your biochemistry is the number one determinant of how well you're going to hit the next shot. Another thing to note, just while we're talking about this, is let's talk about anger for a second. Any emotion, strong, big, large emotion that you have on the course is going to consume resources. And it's just like everything you do in life, right? Whatever we do has a cost. So if we decide to go to dinner for, pizza, that means you can't have dinner for, with Chinese food or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you can have both. I don't know. I don't live your life, but you get what I mean, right? There's a cost. You're either doing A or B. And so similarly, if you're spending your energy on anger, that means you don't have that energy left. Maybe later on the round, you might have more fatigue. You might have more mental busyness. You might have more, just tiredness overall, which is fatigue. Anyway, you get my point, right? So the more you spend resources on unuseful things during the round or unuseful emotions during the round, which all come from expectations, the harder it's going to be for you to play well later on in the round. Even though I am the upbeat golfer, I am not here saying you should be positive all the time, 100% of the time. World's wonderful even when it's burning. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think it's important to set good standards so you can clearly evaluate whether you're actually hitting those standards or if I can't do both of these things here at once. Let me do one at a time. Standards with a T and an A. Good standards even. So setting good standards is really important. And the first piece of setting good standards, I think, is understanding your shot dispersion. And I'm going to put an 80% here. I'll talk about that in a second. So setting good standards is really important to at least understand when you can be a little bit annoyed, when you can be like, oh, I missed what I was supposed to do, when it's an outlier versus when it's a mistake on your part and you should actually care about it. So the way I think about it is the most important piece really, and we talked a little bit about like what qualifies as a bad shot in the previous section, so you can definitely look at those. But in general, understand what your shot dispersion is. If you understand what your shot dispersion is, now you can figure out with something a massive outlier. Like, so for example, say, you're hitting a 150-yard shot, you usually miss 10% on either side, so 15 yards either side is fine. You hit this ball 50 yards left. I'm not worried about outliers, like they happen, freaks of nature, et cetera, they're gone. But if I miss this by 25 yards left, okay, now I'm starting to think, okay, what did I do wrong? What can I do on the next shot that's gonna go better? First, I'm not getting angry about it. I can be disappointed, and that's fair. Getting super disappointed, probably not gonna help my biochemistry, and I think this piece of 80% is really around if you think of, you don't wanna use your entire shot dispersion because it's gonna be like stupidly wide, doesn't make any sense. Pick your 80% shot dispersion. You also don't wanna be like unfair to yourself and be like, well, it's like the people who are like, well, I hit the 7-iron 175 yards once, and so that's my stock range. No, it's not. Your stock range is 165. One day you got really lucky and there was a little bit of a tailwind, et cetera, right? That's the way I think about my driver distance sometimes. The second thing I think is really important in terms of setting good standards is to look at pros as baselines. And so, for example, for the pros on the tour, the average distance to the hole for a 100-yard shot is something like 15 feet. Why are we so annoyed when we're hitting a wedge from 100 yards and it doesn't land in like gimme range? That's not smart. It's not fair, right? And we can say, oh, we're playing easier courses, et cetera. It's like all the other rules apply, but we're also not playing as frequently. We don't do this for a living, and we haven't been doing this since we were like -4 years old. I think it's unfair to judge yourself on the basis of something that is not like an apples to apples comparison. The reason I really like pro baselines is, one, they give me an idea for, okay, what are like the best people in the world doing it from this range? And the second is they give me something to be proud of when I get inside that baseline. And so every time I hit it inside, say like 15 feet from 100 yards, I'm like, good job, Manu, strokes gained, right? Feels really good. And so that's actually something where I'm helping out my biochemistry. And so that expectation that I've created for myself, which is I need to pat myself on the back every time I hit a good shot, helps my biochemistry, puts me in a good place to hit the next shot. And I talked earlier about what qualifies as a bad shot previously, right? And I think it's just important to maybe talk about that for a second again, is to have good expectations. It's really important to understand what actually is a bad shot. So don't get angry at every shot. You don't want to be like overly positive or overly negative, or you're never going to improve. If you're overly positive, you're never going to realize you need to work on something. If you're overly negative, it's just going to make you have bad biochemistry, and everything goes downhill from there. So very simple, understand when you hit a bad shot, and then also you can have a strategy for what to do once you hit that bad shot. For me, that strategy is I go, I wonder what I did there. And then I step back, think about it, and then I let it go, and I go to my next shot and go back to my pre-shot routine and my core swing keys. And I'm not trying to change new things because of what happened on the previous shot, unless it becomes a trend. If it becomes a trend, I will take a step back, maybe when other people are hitting, and I'll figure out what's going on, and I'll try to reset whatever underlying, things I did not do at the beginning of the round. Maybe I didn't go through my 4 switches, which is a great video. I have it somewhere around here. Or maybe there's something else that's going on that I need to compensate for. Usually I'm not trying to make swing changes on the course, but a totally different story. And I think when you're noticing what these bad shots are, also remember that you're hitting good shots. So as humans, what we tend to do, remember I said optimal expectations will change your life. This will also apply to the rest of life. As humans, what we tend to do is we tend to underweight good circumstances and overweight bad circumstances, right? Like people are cautiously optimistic, but I have never heard of somebody being cautiously pessimistic. It's not a thing. Here, at least be like honest and kind to yourself when you're hitting shots or evaluating yourself. So if you're gonna make yourself feel bad for a bad shot, you should also make yourself feel good for a good shot. And in fact, the better you make yourself feel for good shots, the more likely you are to hit more of them as you go forward. And that leads me to a model I've created, which I call the 3 guarantees, trademark. So the 3 guarantees are, number 1, you're going to hit good and bad shots on the course. 100% of the rounds you play, they're gonna be good shots, they're gonna be bad shots. I like to call them not such great shots or shots that didn't go where you wanted, but for the purposes of an easy explanation, we'll call them bad shots. you're gonna hit good and bad shots. It's a guarantee. It's also a guarantee that you're gonna have good and bad luck on the course. Sometimes you get a good bounce, sometimes you won't. Sometimes a wind will work in your favor, sometimes it won't. And you're gonna play good rounds and bad rounds versus your average. That's why it's called your average. So these are guarantees. There is no chance. Look at that trademark. We're gonna do that right there. The point is, this is going to happen. If we know these things are going to happen, why do we get so annoyed about them? Is there a way that we can recognize that these things are going to happen and not be overly negative about them, but also not be overly positive about them? Recognize that the only way we're going to get better is if we understand when we fix our bad shots and kind of where they're coming from, but also do it in like a kind way with ourselves instead of being really angry. The best players I've seen don't get that angry. They're generally pretty chill about stuff. When they notice something going wrong, they stop, they think about it, they move on, and they like make changes for it as they move forward. And my final point of expectations is to turn them into a long-term philosophy. So I can't tell you how many times I've woken up in the morning about to go to the golf course and I'm like, I'm gonna shoot 65 today. I feel so good. It's 65. It's gonna be amazing. I'm a scratch to +1 handicap. My average score is like 75 to 73. Scratch golfers average score 75. Guess how many times I've woken up and been like, I'm gonna shoot 65 today and shot 65? 0. Yes, that is correct. Absolutely 0. Most of the time when I think I'm gonna shoot 65, it ends up being close to 80. So yeah, it doesn't work that way. But we all do this, right? We're all like, I'm gonna go super low today. It's just gonna be the best. Blow super low. Yes, it is great to feel that way. However, play the game with good biochemistry, play the game with your good standards, go through your process, do your regular thing. And I think really recognizing that you don't need to do that. You don't need to have like 1 round of 65 and then 8 rounds of 79 to try to get to where you're trying to go. Although I guess if you're trying to break 80, then yeah, that's good. But you know what I mean, right? Like having 1 round of like 75 and then like 6 rounds of 86, same problem. Instead, if you think about it from the perspective of 1 shot better, if you can do 1 shot better a month, you drop 12 shots a year. That gets you very comfortably, if you're in the 80s, that gets you very comfortably into the 70s, no problem, in a year, which is kind of incredible. If you start looking at your expectations from the perspective of, I'm not trying to make drastic changes. I don't need to be super angry about, or super annoyed, or super disappointed about not being perfect. If I can just recognize that in the entire round I'm playing today, it's just 1 shot. And that 1 shot could be a 3-foot putt. And so just kind of being kind to yourself, recognizing the impact of the biochemistry. I cannot underscore how big it, here I'll underline it as like an underscore. It's so important. I cannot tell you how important it is to just get these things down. If you get these down, all the other stuff just works so much more easily. So expectations, it's written as number 3, but this is the number 1 thing that will prevent you from getting to your goals, but also could positively change your life. And before we get into section 4, I have a quick request. If you're finding this video helpful, could you please let me know by gently nudging that like button or leaving me a comment, which is even better. It really helps me with the engagement and the algorithm. That would be fantastic. I read all of the comments. They make my day. They give me useful feedback. So if you have any feedback, I'll take it. Ideas for other videos that would be helpful for you, basically any of it. So I'd really appreciate that. Thank you. Also newsletter, obviously, But yeah, let's move on to section 4, which is all about, since we talked about expectations, section 4 goes even deeper and it talks about really changing your philosophy. And the reason that this matters is because the best way to start thinking differently at a shot level is to start thinking differently at a round level. And the best way to do that is start thinking differently at a game level. And I see this every time I play, I'm sure you do too. 70s golfers and, better than 70s golfers think very differently to 80s golfers. So if we start changing our philosophy, it should follow that we also start playing like those 70s golfers. And the first mindset change is to understand that score does not always equal progress. Now, score feels good, and I totally will agree with that, right? I've shot some good scores and I felt really good about them. However, if you look at it slightly differently and you start thinking of it from the perspective of, I'm not trying to break 80 today, I'm trying to become a 70-something golfer. So your identity is changing. You're approaching the whole game in a different way. And so while shooting a good score is great, we all love it, really it's about meeting your goals, which are making good decisions, following your process, and mastering your mindset. If you do those things, then over time, the scores kind of follow on their own. And progress doesn't always feel like progress. Yesterday, I played a round. I was 1 over on the front. I bogeyed 9 to go 1 over. I made 8 pars and then bogeyed 9. And then I went 6 over on the back. I lost 4 golf balls, a lot of balls and a lot of water. It wasn't great, but I made progress on that round. I mean, it was not the score I expected. It wasn't the score I wanted, but I learned so much. And because of the things I did wrong during that round, because of the things I could improve, I have changed my pre-round routine. I literally spent half an hour last night sitting down, figuring out what I went wrong. and then I'm going to change that for next time. So I made progress, despite the fact that the score did not reflect the fact that I made progress. Now, if I'd shot a 74, which is closer to my average score, I might not have learned so much. So it's true. So think of it this way, right? You're not always trying to shoot a better score. You're just trying to become a better golfer. And what you'll find is one day you'll be like, wait a second, it feels a lot easier to shoot an 81 than it used to in the past. And then next day you might find that it's a lot easier to shoot a 79 than it felt in the past. And so seriously, it's one of those things where we have massive expectations of what we can do in a short period, but in a slightly longer period, you can actually do a lot more than you think. And to do that, my suggestion is you start thinking in 5 to 10 round blocks instead of individual rounds, and also instead of like an entire season. It's long enough that you actually get some decent data points. It's also long enough that you're not so caught up in this individual shot right now that it has to be the best shot you ever hit, because you're thinking across a broader time frame. But it's also not so long, you know, an entire season or whatever, that it's taking forever for you to actually look at your data and then make changes. So I think a few data points that are somewhat representative is good. Too many, why? And then too few, you're just probably making decisions without actually having a good idea of whether the right decision to make. So think of it this way. The next time you're playing around, instead of thinking of, okay, what's a shot I need to hit now for this XYZ, you know, score, shot, hole, whatever, think about it from the perspective of what's a shot I need to hit on this hole for this shot, based on if I was playing a 4-round tournament. So if this was Thursday and I'm gonna be here till Sunday, and I'm gonna play 4 rounds, then what's the right shot to hit? It'll probably take you away from the hero shots. It'll probably also calm you down a lot more. You'll make fewer bogeys, which means you'll have lower scores. Suddenly you're breaking 80 all the time. You're welcome. This video worked. Good job, Manu. But you know where I'm coming from, right? If you start thinking in a longer time frame, life just gets easier. It actually helps your expectations. It calms your mind down. Everything will get better. This is also helpful because it means that one bad shot doesn't derail you, because you're thinking about the long game and not just like this round and oh no, this one shot is gonna ruin everything, it's gonna be the worst day ever, etc., etc. And so I think a key part of this is to recognize that you can use every single so use every shot, I think, is a really important piece. You can use every shot you play to get better. And here's the point I'm trying to make here. I play with people who, you know, they're having a bad day, they're having like a few bad holes, etc., and then they're like, they just give up. They start, you know, trying to wail on the ball, etc., whatever it is. They give up for the rest of the round. And, you know, we all do that. We've done it before. I've done it before. I've played with somebody before who like walked off the course after 10 holes because he wasn't playing well. You know, everybody has their own choices. But the way I think about it is I cannot play 18 good holes unless I play 17 good holes. And I can't play 17 good holes unless I play 9 good holes. I can't play 9 unless I play 6, and so on. And so anytime I'm having a bad day, and this happened a couple weeks ago, I wasn't doing well. I think I was like 6 or 7 over through 13. And, you know, this is my local course. I usually shoot close to even par there. So I was like, huh, something's going on. So I was like, all right, I'm going to forget about this. And I'm just going to play 6 good holes. I'm going to shoot even par of those 6 good holes. I birdied 18, shot even par for those 6 holes. That worked for me. I was able to reset, and I was able to use every shot and every hole to get better. And that built resilience. That was really valuable for me. So recognizing that you're thinking about things over a long-term time frame just changes everything, right? You're never derailed. You're never so disappointed. You're like, oh, this round was the worst thing ever. I was looking forward to it all week and now it's just terrible. No, I built myself into a better golfer by my resilience, by focusing on the process, achieving those goals, recognizing that score doesn't always equal progress. That round where I was, whatever, 6, 7, 8, I don't even remember what the score was in the first like 12, 13 holes, because I was able to go even par in the last 6, that's the part I remember. And that built me up. It increased my resilience. It made me mentally into a better golfer because I know I can always come back. And you can do the same thing. And that leads us to the last, but also the most important point on philosophy, which you've heard me say a couple of times already, but I'm just gonna talk about it for a moment here because it's so important. And if you do this, it will change your golf game for sure, and also your entire life, which is just being kind to yourself. And I know I've talked about this a little bit, hear me out here. There's so many people I talk to, I do a lot of coaching. So many people use this game as a measurement of their self-worth. We're hitting a ball with a stick, right? Let's be clear, I love the feeling of hitting a ball with a stick. It's a very fancy stick, you know, it's forged. So fancy, it says so right here on the side. But the thing is, literally all it is hitting a ball with a stick. And sometimes I pay a lot of money to go somewhere else and hit a ball with a stick off a different patch of grass. Isn't that fancy? But really what it comes down to is I love the feeling of hitting a ball with a stick, and that's all it is. And so that's what you do, and that's what I do, and that's why we're friends, is because that's a hobby that we have in common. So today, just enjoy the fact that you get to hit ball with stick again. Right? And remember that it doesn't mean anything about you if you hit ball with stick poorly or you put a bunch of them in the water. It's not a measure of your self-worth. It's not a measure of how successful you are at life. It's not a measure of like what you're working on. It's just not working. Oh, it's so terrible, etc. I'm saying all of these things from experience. None of that stuff's actually true. Actually, in my little quick start guide that I have for myself, one of the things I've written in there is one day is going to be the last day I play golf ever. I don't know when that day is. It could be next week. It could be hopefully 150 years from now, or never. Ideally, never. So I'm going to make sure every day I get to go play golf, I enjoy the heck out of it. And I use stronger words for that, but I remind myself every single time before I play every single round of golf, I tell myself that. And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is we just love the feeling of hitting a ball with a stick. And so today, you're going to enjoy the heck out of hitting that ball with a stick. And you're going to celebrate your successes. Celebrate your successes. Pat yourself on the back. And also, you can be grateful for the losses. I am grateful for the 4 balls I put in the water yesterday because they made me into a better ball hitter with stick guy. Probably the most powerful thing in this entire conversation that we're having. The accelerators are great too, so you should stick around for those. But I think this is like the life-changing piece. I think once I started doing this, and I started doing this a few years ago, really being kind to myself and looking at things differently, the acceleration was incredible. Speaking of accelerators, whoa, let's move on to number 5. And here we are at accelerators. So these are things that I consider to be shortcuts, things that'll help you get to your goals much faster. Tactical tips, manuisms, whatever you want to call them. So I like manuism. A little ego in there maybe. So anyway, first accelerator I think is really, really important is to use your head. And I think the best way to explain this is through a short story. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was a kid, I used to play competitive pool and I had to pay for table time and I had to find ways to find money to be able to pay for table time. But I played against a lot of kids whose parents worked at pool halls and so they always had access to tables. So I was never going to beat them on, practice for shot making or things like that. Unfortunately, I had a coach who was smart and he told me, he's like, hey, you are smarter than them, even though you don't have the same access to tables. So you should use your mind instead of trying to just make more shots and figure out how to be better at shot making. Now, apparently I was smarter than them, but I was not smart enough to understand what he meant for ages. I think it took me like 20 years to figure out what he actually meant. But now I get it. And that is the point that I think about when I think about golf, is our core competency for most of us. If you have a desk job, if you have like an everyday non-golf job, then your core competency is thinking. You're probably a knowledge worker or something to that effect. And so if your core competency is thinking, why are we approaching the game, myself included, why are we approaching the game by trying to hit 1 million more balls to try to be like the guys who are on the tour, right? Or the people who are on the tour, because their MO of doing this, they've been playing golf since they were very, very little, right? And so what they do is they go hit 1,000 more balls. Tiger had a short video some time ago where he's like, just go beat balls. Go beat balls. I mean, I don't have that luxury. I have other things I have to do. Also, I've not had a coach watching me since I was 9 months old telling me when I'm hitting a poor shot, right? And so that's not the best way to get around it. But there are other things we can do to just use our heads and be smart. The thing I think about all the time is, how can I use my mind to get myself out of this predicament? Now, I talked about a bunch of things earlier. If you can improve your expectations, you can improve your philosophy. If you can change your biochemistry in the way that you think about things and your responses to things, that's using your head to get yourself into a better position 100% of the time that will allow you to be more consistent because you're able to use more of your procedural memory, more of your actual athleticism, versus if you weren't able to do that, then that would get compromised more often. And so you'd have to have way more reps to be able to do that more regularly. Let me give you a really simple tactical example. Most Muni courses that I've played at, because they get so much traffic on their practice greens, the practice greens are usually a little bit slower than the actual greens on the course. And so a really simple thing I do is I only hit, before a round, if I'm warming up, I only hit downhill putts on the practice green. That's not complicated, right? It'll get me pretty close to what the field's gonna be like on the green, and maybe I won't be able to tell exactly the difference between uphill, downhill, but we're compromising here. And so that's a really simple thing in terms of that. And the best way I've found to really use your core competency, which is your head, is through anticipation. Now, we do a bunch of this already, but I think really focusing on this makes it into a real superpower. So the simple way to think about this is, Nothing that happens on the golf course is really new if you think about it. It's rare that something will happen that's like totally out of the ordinary, totally crazy, etc. Right? So I talked about the 3 guarantees earlier. Things are going to go well, things are going to go poorly, good shots, bad shots, all that stuff. The other thing to note is that the mind is going to catastrophize. It's what it does. It's part of the survival mechanism of the mind. The mind is also going to try to predict the future. The mind is also going to try to add drama, right? It's normal. It happens all the time. Oh, this is so much worse. Oh, I can't hit a shot today. What does this mean about my life? All that's going to happen. There's also other like normal things that are going to happen. You're probably going to get tired. If you're playing in the heat, you're probably going to get hot. You're probably going to get dehydrated. You might have like annoying playing partners. All of this stuff is going to happen. But the thing that's great is now you know what's going to happen. You can anticipate, or you have already anticipated it, and you can create an optimized plan for it. That, I think, is where using your head turns into a better golfer much, much, much quicker. And so for me, for most of these things happening, I have a plan for this stuff. If I'm playing with somebody who's like really chatty, I have a plan for how I can kindly say to them, hey, I'd like to focus on my game or whatever, or I find like nice ways to talk to them that will get them to like calm down, leave me alone. I've had this happen enough times that I've like learned ways to do this without feeling like a bad person myself. And vice versa, right? If somebody is like rude to me, I can let that go without letting it affect my game. So anticipating what was going to happen on the course, specifically for yourself, I think is the biggest part. With other people, obviously important. In your body is another one. This is a huge superpower as long as you pair it with adaptation. This part, I think, is also a huge one. So adapting to the circumstances that you have on the day is going to make a massive difference. Now, again, what's cool is most of this stuff you know is going to happen, so you can also have a plan for this. And suddenly you're noticing that you're going to move much, much, much quicker as you're trying to get to your goals. And now let's get to some real tactical accelerators. So here's the first one. I call it a cheat sheet. And if you've watched some of my other videos, you've probably heard me talk about this. I think it is massively, massively valuable. So I showed this earlier. This is like my plan for this round. Here's my cheat sheet. It's in the middle. I've written it down. You don't need to read it all. It varies, right, for different ones. But for me, just to give you a quick idea, I have an idea of like my swing thought. I have an idea of like how I'm going to reset. I also have an idea of what my goal is for the day. My goal here was I wanted to make a good decision. I wanted to do a good job of like my process, and I wanted to focus. In general, I suggest you write down your cheat sheet, whatever it is for every round. And you don't have to write one specifically like mine. You can if you want to. That's kind of, good practice, I think. But even just like if you get a scorecard, when you get the scorecard, at some point there will be some empty space on the scorecard. Write it down. The reason you want to write it down is so you don't have to waste brain space or allocate brain space to trying to remember it as you're going through the round. Because the calmer and the more relaxed your mind is, the more space you'll have to be able to hit good shots, versus also having to try to remember, okay, what's my goal for the day? What's my reset routine? The other thing is it's also an external trigger. So when you pull out the scorecard, you notice it, you're like, oh yeah, I should do that. And so you don't need to have to continuously remember to do it or be reminded by something going wrong to then go back to your cheat sheet and figure that out. Now, I've played tons of rounds with and without a cheat sheet, and without a doubt, I can tell you I am generally going to play significantly better if I've written these things down. Also, the act of just writing something down helps you remember it better. So tactical item number 2 is about water and food planning. And I think this is another thing that's really kind of overlooked by a lot of people. I am not here telling you not to eat a hot dog. I'm just here telling you not to eat a hot dog during your round. Sorry. I think if you want to, absolutely, number one thing, enjoy hit ball with stick. So if you want to eat 5 hot dogs while you do it, totally go for it. However, what you eat and what you drink is going to affect your biochemistry, and your biochemistry is going to affect how you play. So making good decisions on water, especially, I highly recommend this. I actually wore a continuous glucose monitor for a while. I'm pointing because I put it on here. I wore a continuous glucose monitor for a while to see how my blood sugar changed as I played around. And I noticed that often when I got hungry, I actually wasn't hungry, I was just thirsty. And so that really helped me also figure out, okay, I don't need to be eating all the time. I can be drinking more water, and that will actually help me play better, which it has. And so something to think about for yourself. If you want, you can always get a continuous glucose monitor, but just like, the basics of this, there's plenty of stuff out there. You can use AI to help you with this. Definitely experiment, because everyone's different, but this on its own, everything that's going to affect your biochemistry is going to affect the way you play. Food and water is a big piece of it. And one thing that's going to affect the rest of your round, along with the food and water you have, is the course and weather prep that you do. So for example, on cold days, I don't just take water, I take hot water. I take some tea or herbal tea or something in a bottle, because that warms me up because it's cold outside. And so recognizing what the course is going to be like that day helps you offload a bunch of stuff, so you're anticipating and you can adapt accordingly. but also recognizing what the weather's like allows you to do the right things for yourself, what you're wearing. Also for me, actually, it affects a lot with like how far I can hit the ball, because not just the temperature, but also if I'm wearing a lot of layers, I'm not going to be able to make a full swing, right? And so I might be making shorter swings, restrictions, etc. So I need to hit different clubs and so on. And so the anticipation of where you're going to play, what the weather, temperature, etc. is going to be like, therefore what you need to do. We know this stuff already. It's very automatic. If you go somewhere else, you're automatically going to be thinking of this stuff. Think of this stuff on the golf course too, and adapt accordingly. These little things, I guarantee you, they'll take shots off your game so quickly, and you'll suddenly be like, wow, I didn't even realize this works so well. It really does. Okay, 2 more accelerators. The first one, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, was the pre-round routine. Now, in my opinion, this is the #1 most valuable thing in terms of building consistency in your game. I know everybody thinks it's a pre-shot routine. You want to get right state before every shot. If you don't have a good pre-round routine, then your pre-shot routine is going to be really hard to execute well, because your mind might be in a different place. Your body might be in a different place. This, I think, is tremendously, tremendously important. Why? Because we are different people every day. How you slept, how your body feels, what you ate last night, what other conversations you had that day, what's going through your head, all of those things change who you are as a person when you arrive at the golf course. If you arrive with an hour to go before your round, you're going to be different than if you arrive with 5 minutes to go before your round. So having a good pre-round routine to get your mind into a consistent headspace, and ideally to get your body into a place where like the right muscles are woken up, so you're not compensating with different muscles, is going to be huge. So if you can come up with a simple pre-round routine, I have one, and I'll link it up here, right? It's in the thing called the 4 switches you need to turn on. But if you can turn on your pre-round routine every single time, this is the #1 most important thing in terms of becoming a consistently better golfer every single time. Again, comes back to using your head, right? And here we are at the final accelerator for today, which is actually a model that my wife created, which she calls the 4 steps to solving a problem. I'm not going to write that whole thing out, but the 4 steps to solving a problem. And since it's her model, I'm going to give it a little TM. And so the 4 steps to solving a problem are super simple. They are: step 1, recognize there's a problem. Step 2, recognize you're the only person who can solve that problem. So not offloading on somebody else, like you are your own savior of that, for that problem. Number 3, try something. And step 4, try something else. Now, I know those seem super simplistic, but I promise they are life-changing once you get them. Now, for most of us, and especially we'll talk about them in relation to the golf game too, right? So for most of us, what tends to happen is, first, it takes us a long time to figure out that there's actually a problem. Either we're ignorant about it or we're in denial about it. And ideally, that's where like having 4 balls go in the water like I had yesterday was really helpful, because it helped me figure out something else I could add to my pre-round routine. I needed things to get worse or to get so bad that I had to stop and think about it. So that's when I recognized I had a problem. If you can recognize when you have problems earlier, you're able to fix them faster. The second thing, and I think this one's really important, is recognizing that's your problem to solve. Now, the biggest issue I've seen with this is a lot of people are super nice with their friends. I've played with a bunch of people like this, where every time I hit a bad shot or a shot that didn't go the way I planned, they blame it on something outside of me, right? They'd be like, oh, the wind is just really swirly here. Or like, those people are making noise, or this, that, whatever. They would blame something outside to help make me feel better. And that's wonderful. I think they're great people, and I really appreciate them for that. Having said that, once the responsibility is no longer on me, once this problem is an external problem, I can't change it. And so while I'm nice to them, and I'll be like, oh yeah, thanks. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I should have gauged that wind. Or could I have gauged that wind? Like, was it a gust, or was it something that I just like misgauged? I thought it was like 5 miles an hour, it's actually like 15. Okay, cool. So recognizing that it's your problem to solve and it's you who can do something about it also gives you a tremendous sense of agency, hugely, hugely valuable. The third step is try something. And we all do this. I don't think we tend to have a problem with this. But then the 4th step, which is try something else, I think is really important. And so if you're stuck trying to make swing changes and it's been a long time and you're like, man, I just need to make this work. I've tried to like fire my hips for like 3 years and I just can't do it. Try something else. Maybe firing your hips is not the problem. Maybe the issue, and this is something I was talking to somebody about this the other day, like he's having issues firing his hips, but the problem is not that he can't fire his hips. The problem is he's turned around so much, his backswing is so kind of turned where there's no separation, that firing his hips means he has to try to fire his whole body. He's never going to get a good outcome. And so trying something else, whether that's going to a different coach or going back to like what the root cause of that problem might be, thinking about what happened before this move. There's so many other things you can do, but I highly recommend trying something else. You are so smart, I guarantee this, you are so smart that you will be able to figure something out. And if you can't solve something in a short-ish period of time, you should move on. Now, obviously there's a caveat here. I mentioned this earlier, system 2 versus system 1. You don't want to be moving so quickly between system 2 opportunity or system 2 problems that you're like system 2 to system 2, like it never gets to system 1. So give yourself a little bit of time, right? But if it's been like 6 months or a year, at this point, it's not a system 2, system 1 problem. It's that you need to go to step 4, which is try something else. So this is a tremendously powerful model. You can use it in every part of your life. It has changed my life. I'm really grateful to her for having come up with it. Massively useful. Step 1, recognize there's a problem. Step 2, recognize it's your problem to solve. Step 3, try something. And step 4, try something else. Okay, whew, that was a lot, right? It's all good. If you feel like your mind is overflowing, no stress. We've got some next steps here. So all good, all good. Before I get into that, if you'd like to work with me, I've got a link down below where you can set up a free intro chat and, you know, give it a go. Worst case, we'll have a great conversation. Best case, we could be BFFs forever. That's like BFFF. Kind of amazing, right? So give it a go. We'll see what we get. So let's get into next steps. First, you're going to decide that you're going to become a 70s golfer, right? That is a big deal because once you change your identity, everything else is going to start following. And you know it's going to happen, right? So you might as well just decide and start celebrating right now. But I'm serious, from a psychological perspective, this is a huge deal. Decide. Just make a commitment to yourself. I'm going to become a 70s golfer. That's all you got to do. Doesn't mean you have to add a whole bunch of extraneous stuff onto it, just this one part. And 2, as part of this, commit to making smart decisions that move you forward. This is an important thing. As you tell your brain this, it will start looking for those smart decisions and it will opt to not make dumb decisions. It really works, trust me. If you just decide you're gonna do this and start committing to this, super, super powerful. Another part of this whole commitment thing is number 3, which is only focusing on things that empower you. This means letting go of expectations that don't serve you. This means letting go of negative self-talk. This means being kind to yourself, because all this stuff empowers you, improves your biochemistry, and allows you to bring out your best every time you step up to the ball. If you can do that, how quickly do you think you're gonna break 80? How quickly do you think you're gonna be able to break 80 consistently? Pretty much all the time, right? If you start thinking about these things, so this is all really, I mean, hey, I'm the Upbeat golfer, I talk about this, but the reason I do it is because it works. So once you create a good expectation in your mind and you start moving yourself in that direction, tremendously powerful. Number 4 is pretty tactical, which is what I said earlier. The number 1 thing that will lead you to more consistency in your game is adopting a great pre-round routine. Now, the rest of the stuff I've talked about today, I'm sure it's gonna go into your mind, into your subconscious, and you'll be able to pull it out different times. Maybe there's a few things you've highlighted, the things you wanna work on, like 2 good chip shots, 2 wedges, etc., etc. However, starting point, you should really build one of these. And feel free to adopt mine. There's a video right here that talks all about it. This pre-round routine will be hands down the number 1 thing for your consistency. So, a lot of stuff today. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know, and I'll see you again soon. You're the best. Bye.